Hello there, Cambridge Pagan Moot. So today I'm going to be talking a little bit about Bel or Belenos, the Celtic god of sunlight and healing. And I do feel he's a very appropriate deity to be talking about at the moment. So I do hope everyone is well and managing okay in their partial isolation and able to get out in the sunshine still and soak up the glorious rays of Bel. So I'm going to be talking for maybe half an hour, perhaps a bit less, and I hope, if I can work out the technicalities, to upload a few pictures. Now there's not much about Bel. There's a wonderful carved limestone temple pediment from France, which I'm still trying to locate a photograph of that, and one or two other things, so including a few artists' impressions, which are a mixed bag really. They have something going for them, so I'm going to upload those to go with the video if I possibly can work out how to do it. If not, we will put them separately on the Facebook page, no doubt. Okay, so Bel or Belenos is probably one of the less well-known Celtic deities. This is really quite a pity, because he's a very attractive, great deity of broad significance. Inscriptions to Bel from Romano-Celtic times are found, in fact, over a wide area of Europe. He was not simply a local tribal deity, although in fact he was that for the Norici tribe of Noricum, but he was invoked as an omnipresent deity throughout the Celtic world, associated with healing, strength and sunlight. He seems like a very helpful deity indeed to be exploring in these difficult times. So who is Bel and why is he worth getting to know? Belenos, Belenos, or Belenos with a double L, the spelling varies, is known from inscriptions all over the Celtic world, including Gaul and Britannia, also the Western Alps, and particularly the mountainous region of Noricum in what is now Austria and part of Slovenia, where he was the tribal deity, as I said, of the Norici. He was often associated with Apollo and was certainly a god of light and healing, and also of healing springs. Now, of course, originally the Celts themselves did not carve letters into stone. That wasn't really part of their culture. But once they had been somewhat Romanized, they started to do this, which is just as well, because otherwise we would know virtually nothing about Belenos and many other important Celtic deities for that matter. Even with these inscriptions, there are apparently about 51 in total, we don't know very much about him. But I personally don't see that as a problem, quite the contrary in fact. Because Celtic deities are such liminal, chimerical figures, with no fixed iconography and implements, nor even in many cases a fixed canon of myth, you can work with them in whatever way suits you best. In the best sense, they can be whatever you want or need them to be. But beware, they do have their own energy and presence. At least I believe so. And if you stray too far from this, your evocations will not work, or may even be counterproductive. Whilst I am fascinated by the Greco-Roman deities, many of their myths paint them in a very unattractive light. Those Olympian deities were, to be blunt, incestuous, philandering egoists a lot of the time, bent on satisfying their desires and destroying their enemies. Well, so perhaps were the Celtic deities, but in many cases we do not have myths of that kind associated with them. So one is left free to invent them in a way that best suits one's ideals and interests. As a Buddhist, I am naturally looking for deities that are compassionate and wise and at one with nature. Well, the god and the goddesses I am exploring here certainly seem to manifest in that way. Now, there are a few different etymologies proposed for Belenos' name, but for the most part I'm going to stick with the most obvious one. Simply the fair, bright, shining one, from the Indo-European root bel, B-H-E-L, which means to shine. The idea that the name might come from a Celtic root gwelenos, meaning source, well, or spring, is also a very attractive one that ties in with some of the inscriptions that have been found at healing springs. The place where Bel is best attested, due to it having been Romanized quite early on, is the city of Aquileia, on the coastline at the top of the Adriatic, somewhat east of where Venice would later be founded. He was so well known there that two emperors, Maximian and Diocletian, both left inscriptions to him. By this time, although Celtic in origin, Bel had been very much adopted as the city's patron and protector. So much so that in the year 238, when Aquileia was besieged, soldiers reported seeing a vast form of the god up in the air over the city walls, defending it from attack. But much more frequently, it seems, Belenos was associated with healing. Just like the god Apollo, deity of light, healing, poetry and oracles. Many of the inscriptions, in Aquileia especially, tie Belenos and Apollo together, and classical writers several times mention them as being one and the same. But Bel it was who lingered long in this region, much longer than old Apollo, long after the supposed conversion to Christianity. In fact, in the 19th century, in the mountains of Slovenia just north of where Aquileia was, there were still traditions concerning a god called Belin amongst the peasants. And he was still seen as a god of healing and was reputed to cure blindness. Now, the associations with healing and light very much come together in the Celtic spring festival of Beltane, which was celebrated at a date on the Celtic lunar calendar around the 1st of May. Actually, we don't know for sure that Bel and Beltane were linked, but it is hard to think that they were not, as the associations and the name, of course, go together so well. On this day, as the sun was gathering in power in the sky, and new growth of trees and crops was well underway, fires were lit, and people gathered on mountainsides and hilltops to share special cakes, and no doubt ale or mead as well. At the same time, cattle were driven between two large bonfires, in the belief that this would purge them and prevent disease. This important ceremony was apparently supervised by the local druids, and invested with considerable sacred as well as practical significance. How could Bel not have been there to make sure it all went well? At other times of the year, it seems that Belenos was most closely associated with healing springs. The best preserved of these is at Essarios, near Châtillon-sur-Seine in Burgundy. The inscriptions here are in fact to Apollo Vindonus. However, Vindonus simply indicates clear light and the colour white, So, when taken together with the Apollonian healing associations, it seems that Vindonus was simply another name for Belenos. Here, springs arise in lush meadows, and a Roman limestone pediment still exists, on which is carved a radiant god with rays of sunlight streaming from his face. Many ancient offerings have been found here, some representing body parts needing a cure, and some rather charmingly in the shape of a hand, offering fruits or a cake. Truly, this is the home of Belenos, and when travel is possible, surely there could be few better places for a pagan to go on pilgrimage. Another very interesting shrine to Belenos was at Sainte Sabine in Burgundy. Here were found several ancient clay figurines in the shape of a horse, which had clearly been left as offerings. Given that wheel-shaped offerings have also been found at places where there are Belenos inscriptions, it is tempting to join these together and see him very much as a chariot-driving god. In fact, driving the chariot of the sun across the sky, as in many other deities in many other mythologies across the world. This remains speculative, but it is certainly a powerful, rousing image that ties in very well with the few facts we have about Belenos. Belenos may have had a consort or female counterpart. A goddess called Belestis, perhaps related to fertility and crops, is documented in the regions of the Noricci, but not elsewhere. However, in Gaul, there have been found images of Bel next to a female deity, who is probably the Gaulish goddess Bellissima. Very little is known about Bellissima, but stone inscriptions from Gaul show that she was associated with the Roman goddess of craft and wisdom, Minerva, the Roman equivalent of Greek Athene. Izama seems to be an emphatic root, so Bellissima is the very brightly shining one, indeed a suitable consort for Belenos. No inscriptions to Bellissima have been found from Britannia, but intriguingly the Greek geographer Ptolemy says that in Britannia there was a river in the northwest of the province, either the Ribble or the Mersey, which was known around the 2nd century CE by the name of Bellissima. So this would make her less of a corn goddess and more of an aquatic deity, along the lines of the goddess Sulis Minerva, whose home, of course, was the sacred springs at Bath. I would just like to add here that the associations connected with Bellissima that we know about are quite close to those of another, much better known Celtic goddess, Brigid. She was certainly a goddess of light and fire, associated with the season of spring, as well as with poetry, healing, fertility and crafts. A 10th century Irish writer, the monk Cormac, says in his glossary that Brigid, the beloved of poets, had two sisters, Brigid the healer and Brigid the smith. So there are many connections between this triple goddess and Bellissima Minerva. Indeed, I would suggest that working with Belenos and Brigid together would be an excellent way to proceed if you like your deities to come in male-female pairs. But what of working with Bel himself, especially at this dark time when there is great need of light and healing in the world? I have a few suggestions to offer. An uplifting and healing approach would simply be to repeat his name in a prayerful way, or to repeat something like, "O Belenos, hear my prayer," over and over as if it were a mantra, One might want to couple his name with that of Apollo if you are inspired by the Greco-Roman divinities. Belenos Apollo trips off the tongue quite nicely and makes him effectively into a more universal pan-European deity. Now, as regards visualization, I would recommend visualizing Belenos in two different ways. Either as a Celtic warrior king, a bit like Arthur, with a very noble face, a fine moustache and dressed in kingly garb, very rich and colourful, as beloved of the Celts. But his face should be golden and shining with dazzling sun-like rays. He might be mounted on a horse, or sitting in regal fashion on a magnificent throne. One might imagine oneself bowing before him and perhaps receiving a blessing. A more advanced level would be to imagine oneself as Belenos. The well-known pediment carved with his face at Asarios shows just his face with rays streaming out from it into the world. So this could be another approach. I certainly find this to be an extremely invigorating and uplifting image. Alternatively, one might focus on the elemental associations of Belenos. Personally, I see him manifesting as a bubbling spring, surrounded by lush green meadows or woods sparkling in the sunlight, an eternal source of life and healing. Such imagery seems to tie in very well with what we know of him from the healing springs in Gaul, as mentioned above. So that's a short introduction to Belenos. I hope you found that stimulating and you might want to do further research. Do let us know if you come up with anything interesting. I'm going to finish with a short prayer to Belenos to invoke his power. O great Belenos, Shining One, hear our call. In times of trouble, in times of plenty, send your healing rays that enliven the earth, and bring forth new life in the season of spring. Be strong for us as you ride your chariot of light across the sky. Be a source of healing as you bubble from the earth in the springs and fountains of the green land. God of light, who is everywhere present, who is never daunted, hear our prayer.